So first we'll translate the sentences from plain English to first order logic. So the first sentence is, it is a crime for an American to sell weapons to hostile nations. Now, how many variables do we need in this? There are three distinct entities or roles involved in this relation. There is a seller, there is an object being sold, and there is a receiver. Okay, so therefore we need a variable for who is selling, we need a variable for what is being sold, and we need a variable for to whom is it being sold. So we can use any variables, but let's say normally we use x, y, z. So we use the variable x for the seller, we use y for the thing being sold, and we use z for the buyer. Okay, now it is a crime for an American to sell weapons to hostile nations. It is a crime. It is a crime can be denoted as criminal clause. Okay, so we'll create one clause for it is a crime. Now here there is a seller, there is an object being sold, and there is someone who is the buyer. Okay, so these are all people. X, Y, Z are all people. It is a crime, but we are not creating any variable for crime. So basically we are creating variables for the criminal, a person who commits the crime. So for it is a crime, that means it will be translated to criminal X. Now when is X a criminal? So these are the conditions. If these conditions are satisfied, then X will be decided, or X will be treated or considered as a criminal. Okay, so it is a crime for, these are the conditions, an American. So firstly X must be an American. So American X to sell weapons. Now as I told you, there are three roles. American is selling weapons to hostile nations. So there are three roles. The seller is American, so American X, and weapon. So we need something for weapon, what is being sold. So and weapon Y. Okay, and hostile nation Z, or simply hostile Z. Now Z, in this case we are treating the nation itself as a person. Okay, so Z is the buyer. Z performs the role of a buyer. Okay, so Z in this case is a nation, X is a person, Y is a weapon. So now American X and weapon Y and hostile Z. So we have established our X, Y, Z, that is the seller, the weapon, and the buyer. So now the only thing that remains is connecting all these three with a sells predicate or sells clause. Okay, so sells X comma Y comma Z. That means X sells Y to Z. Now this is your freedom. You can choose to define sells in any way that you want. So you can say that sells X comma Z comma Y. You can mention the seller first, buyer next, and then third thing can be the weapon. There is no hard and fast rule. The only thing is that in the exam or wherever you are defining these clauses, you have to define it. What do you mean a particular clause to be? And in this case, we cannot do with any less than three variables, because there are three roles: the buyer, seller, and the object being sold or bought. Okay, and therefore, so the sentence will be American X and weapon Y and hostile Z and sells X comma Y comma Z. These conditions, if these conditions are satisfied, that implies that X is a criminal, implies criminal X. Now it is true for all Americans, right? It is true for all Americans, so I will use the quantifier for all X. It is true for any weapon or all weapons. It can be any weapon. Okay, it can be a knife, it can be a pistol, it can be any weapon. Okay, so for all Y. And hostile nation is no specific nation, any hostile nation. So it is for all Z. So here the quantifiers for every variable are for all X, for all Y, and for all Z. So I think the first statement was clear. Now the second statement. The second statement is all missiles are weapons. This is very simple. All missiles are weapons. Now here I will say that all missiles, so missiles X is one clause or predicate and weapons X is another predicate. Now what I am saying is if X is a missile, then X is a weapon. Okay, if X is a missile, then X is a weapon. So missile X implies weapon X. Okay, I am not saying this statement is not X is a missile and X is a weapon. It's not like that. It's so in that case I would have used missile X and weapon X. It is saying all missiles are weapons. So all missiles. Therefore, I am using universal quantifier for all X. Missile X implies weapon X. Now why only one variable over here? Because in this sentence we are talking only of one object. We are talking about the same object being the missile and same object being the weapon. Okay, if something is a missile, then that same thing is a weapon. There is only one entity involved, so only one variable is enough. Okay, so whenever a sentence is classifying one object from another, like it is categorizing the object. Okay, so whenever it is classifying one object from one category, okay, into another category, so but the object is still the same. So X also falls under the category of missiles and X also falls under the category of weapons. So in that case we can say that missile X implies weapon X, and in that case we can say that because it is the one and only same object, therefore we will use only one variable X. Now the third statement, all enemies of America are hostile. That is how you define the predicate hostile. So again this is almost same as all missiles are weapons. So just like we had created one category that is missile, one category that is weapon, and all missiles are weapons, so we need only one variable. Similarly here we are saying enemies of America is one thing, hostile is one thing, and we are talking about one and the same object, right? So therefore we'll say that whoever is an enemy of America is hostile. That is one single entity, so we'll use only one variable over here. So for all X, enemy X implies hostile X. But now here there is one more thing, like for example, enemy X does not clearly specify. So there are two options here. Either you can say enemy of America, the predicate itself can be renamed as enemy of America X, or we can create a more general kind of a predicate that is enemy, okay, and X and Y are enemies. So enemy X comma Y, there are two objects, like one of them is a person, or maybe both of them are nations. In this case they are not persons, both of them are nations. Okay, so nations X and Y are enemies, so that is the enemy clause. Okay, so we'll prefer the more general kind of an predicate over here. So we'll say that enemy X comma America. America is not a variable over here. America is like a constant, a fixed constant America. So whoever is an enemy of America is hostile. So there is only one variable X. Okay. Now, if the sentence would have been something like every country that is an enemy of another country is hostile, how many variables would it have needed? If the sentence was every country that is an enemy of another country is hostile, so then how many variables would have been required? Then we would have required two variables, because for every country X, if there exists a country Y with which it is an enemy, so then X is hostile. Okay, so let's move ahead. Right now, for all X, enemy X comma America implies hostile X. That is the third statement. Fourth statement is no is an enemy of America. So now here we can again have two options. Either we can say enemy of America as a predicate and we'll say no in the bracket. But better option over here, or more general option, cleaner option, is enemy is a plain predicate, enemy no comma America. That same enemy predicate, if it's a longer paragraph or a longer document, that same enemy predicate can be used for some other countries as well. One of them need not always be America. There can be other two nations as enemies also. So that's why writing it as enemy instead of enemy of America, keeping it more general, helps. So enemy no comma America, that is statement 4. Simple, no is an enemy of America. We don't need any quantifier over here. It's just a fact we are defining. Enemy no comma America. No variable in this. Then Colonel West is an American. Again, no variable required in this, because it's just saying the fact that we have created a predicate American X is an American. So here we are simply substituting or simply saying Colonel West is an American. So American West. Then Nono has some missiles. Now this is a very interesting sentence. Pay attention. Nono has some missiles. Okay. Now how many missiles? We don't know. Does Nono have all the missiles in America? No. Okay. Does Nono own every missile possible? No. So, but Nono does own missiles. Okay. So, owns is a clause that we'll have to create for this, as you can see, or has. Okay, you can also create a clause or predicate called as has Nono comma X. Nono has X. Or we can say owns Nono comma X. Nono owns missiles, has missiles, owns missiles. You do both of them are fine. Missile X. Now missile X, you cannot mix both the things. Like you need to create a clause missile X, because you have to say that X is a missile. Now Nono owns X and X is a missile. Why did we simply say that owns Nono comma missile? Because missile is not a constant, right? There can be multiple missiles, multiple types of missiles, multiple quantity of multiple types of missiles. So X can be any missile. Okay, X is a missile. That's why we need a variable for that. So missile X and owns Nono comma X. Missile is not one singular thing. Nono owns that one specific missile. It's not like that. Nono has some missiles. Okay, so missile X and owns Nono comma X. Now again note that we are not using implication. Implication is too strong to use over here. It's not like missile X implies owns Nono comma X. That will be more correct if we want to say that if X is a missile, then Nono owns it. It's not the case, right? So we are saying some missiles are there with Nono, some other missiles maybe with someone else, etc. Okay, so missile X and owns Nono comma X, and there exists X will be used over here because there are some missiles which are owned by Nono. Okay, now why do we use an existential quantifier over here? Because it does not tell us which missile. It just says that there exists at least one missile that Nono has. There exists some X. We can rewrite this same statement as there exists some X such that X is a missile and Nono owns X. Okay. Now why did we use the same variable in missile X and owns Nono comma X? Because we mean the same object in both the places. We are not saying that one object is a missile and maybe some completely different object is owned by Nono. We are saying that there exists an object which is both a missile and owned by Nono. So the same variable just appears in both the places. Okay, that shared variable is the glue between both the predicates owns and missile. Okay, the seventh statement, all missiles of Nono were sold to it by Colonel West. All missiles of Nono. Now how many variables will be required over here? All missiles of Nono were sold to it by Colonel West. Now missiles of Nono. Of Nono means there is an ownership, right? So we have an owns clause. So Nono has missiles. So we can use the has clause or the owns clause. So owns Nono comma X. Okay. What is X? X is a missile. So missile X and owns Nono comma X. Okay. So if now we are talking about a specific missile X. So missile X and owns Nono comma X. Why only one variable over here? Because see, selling has three arguments, right? Sells when we defined cells up there, we defined it as cells x comma y comma z. Okay. Now why only one variable? So let's start with cells. Here the seller is fixed, seller is West. Also the buyer is fixed, buyer is no. The only item being sold, that is the variable. Okay, the item being sold is the variable. Okay, so that item is missile, so only one variable x is needed. Okay, why do we again need a variable for x even? Why can't we simply say missile, cells West comma missile comma no? Because again, it's not like we are talking about one specific missile. We are saying all missiles of no were sold to it by Colonel West. All missiles of no. So whichever missiles no has, it can have one missile, it can also have two missiles, it can have 100 missiles. We don't know. So that's why it has to be X. Okay, we cannot have any constant over here. We can have a constant for West and no because they are the buyers and sellers. They are the buying and selling parties. Okay, so that is the only variable x. Now for all x, if x is a missile and no owns x, all missiles owned by no. So this part we are writing missile x and owns no comma x. We are writing it this way to translate all missiles of no. All missiles of no. What other way can you think of writing this? All missiles of no. So can you say that? Can you create a different predicate? Let's say missiles of no. Missiles of no x implies cells West comma x comma no. Now what is the problem in creating a new predicate over here, like missiles of no x? The problem is that we already have created a predicate for missiles above. X being a missile is already defined as a predicate. Owns no comma x. Owns is also a predicate that we have created above. Okay, and you should be conscious about the flexibility as well as the problem you are trying to solve. You have already decided a framework. You should follow that same framework in the upcoming sentences as well. Whenever you are translating a new statement, take a look at all the previous statements that you have already translated and don't unnecessarily introduce new clauses. If you can, use the same clauses which you have consistently used in the previous statements. Okay, so I want to reuse the missile clause or missile predicate that I have created. I want to reuse the owns predicate that I have created. So missile x and owns no comma x. Okay, and of course the more general it is, it's always better. So owns no comma x is more general than saying that missiles of no, because what if we want to say that all grenades of no were sold to it by Colonel West? So then you have to create another predicate which is grenades of no. Okay, and then what if you are saying that all grenades of Popo were sold to it by Colonel West? So then you'll have to create another predicate for that other country. Or all swords of Toto were sold to it by Colonel West, so you will have to create another clause which is swords of Toto. So instead of that, we want to keep it as general as possible. Okay, so in all these things, whether it is swords or grenades or whether it's missiles, we can reuse owns in all the cases. We'll only need separate clauses for the weapon itself, and then again we can use the weapon clause to establish that that is a weapon, unlike saying that all apples of no were sold to it by Colonel West. So then apple is not a weapon. Okay, so that is the seventh statement.